Good morning and welcome to the final day of the Nigerian Economic Summit happening live in the FCT Abuja. We have been presenting Breakfast Central every day for the past 3 days, bringing you live updates from NES as well as discussing some of the biggest political stories. You're very welcome to the show. I am Olive Emodi.
And yes, unfortunately, our time in the FCT comes to an end after the Nigerian Economic Summit closes today. But we've had a very, very interesting time, and of course, looking forward to be back in our Lagos studios tomorrow. But for today, we're going to be having discussions, centering on the activities from yesterday, the important discussions that happened yesterday, and things to pick up from there. I am Osarogie.
All right, we have with us in the studio Perpetual. Hello, Perpetual. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good morning to you. Good morning, Osarogie. Good to be here again with you.
Good morning. Good to have you here as well. And I'm sure that you were very excited about yesterday's coverage. But before we go into the details of yesterday's coverage, we also have in our Lagos studio, we have Judith. Hello, Judith.
A very good morning to you guys, and good morning to you, Olive. Good morning, Osa, and also good morning to Perpetual, Fasomi Peters. And of course, day 3, finally, the last day of what has been quite an event. The last 3 days has been very insightful and just sticking to the theme of collaborativeness when it comes to discussing the way forward in terms of our economic and state of the nation.
Thank you very much, Judith, for holding it down. We certainly have missed being in Lagos, and we're sure that you have missed us so much. The rest of the team, we've been seeing all your tears and your cries in the group chat. Not to worry, Breakfast Central team will be back to Lagos to bring back all the sunshine and sunlight. Okay, let's come into the conversation as to what exactly happened yesterday at the Nigerian Economic Summit. There were panel sessions and speakers, and of course, Perpetual Fasomi Peter, who is our business lady, takes us through an insight of all that happened yesterday. Over to you, Perpetual.
Right, absolutely. We had roundtables, we had CEO roundtables, we also had pocket of conversations here and there, but I was able to track 3 of them, and I think these 3 conversations that I tracked are quite instructive. The first one talks about, fiscal reforms for a more secure future, and that particular one had the Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy. And so the conversation, as you would expect, it talked about, the reforms and how that these reforms are beginning to give the country a good face. He said these reforms have helped us in generating more revenue, and that this is good and all of that. So when he talked about that, he said some other things, and I was really happy that even some of the panelists had to also say things like, yes, we understand that, revenue generation has increased, but to what use has this revenue been put? Because that's also very important. If you're generating revenue at the expense of the private sector, at the expense of businesses, that's something to be questioned. And so he then talked about, we're talking about fiscal reform. So we're doing some fiscal reforms, whether it's the Economic Stabilization Bill, which of course has the ASAP recommendations, and the question is how many of those things have actually been implemented, because that's something we have to look at. And then he also talked about the withholding tax, how that's going to help businesses. And I actually spoke to a businesswoman yesterday, and she talked about the fact that they are really excited about that withholding tax because it means a lot for them. There are some deductions that are done from the level of their suppliers and all of that. So what it means is that someone even said that means about 100 million or so will no longer be deducted, from the supplier stage and all of that. And I think that's a good thing for business, but the question is, when is it starting? We're hearing that implementation is going to start January 2025, but businesses cannot wait because businesses are bleeding. We're seeing results of publicly quoted businesses, and it's not something you're proud of. It's not something you're happy about, especially when you look at the FMCGs. That's the fast moving consumer goods. Or you also want to look at telcos. They're also going through their own. And I think one thing is actually very instructive, and that's what we've been hearing from the World Bank, IMF, and all of that. And on Monday we heard what the representative of AJ Banga said, talking about how that this reform, it's the right thing to do at this point in time. And yesterday, we also had Ndiame Diop, that's the country director of World Bank, saying that these reforms are actually good because they have actually tracked Nigeria. What they see is that in terms of revenue generation, we've moved from the lowest, one of the lowest countries, about 7% to 10% over a short period. And he's saying that 3% movement over a short period is quite, it's commendable. However, we have people say, we understand that we're moving, we're having revenue. When you disaggregate this revenue we're talking about, what's it made up of? It's made up of Naira devaluation. So at the end of the day, when you say, oh, we're making maybe 10 trillion naira or 20 trillion naira, maybe some percentage more than what we made before. The question is, when you look at this particular 10 trillion naira, is it the same thing with 5 trillion naira last year?
I mean, even just the value, you can tell that there's a huge difference.
There's a huge difference.
Even just yesterday, the Consumer Pricing Index was released by the Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics, and you will see that there's also been an inflation recorded. Yes, there was progress in the past 2 months, but we're seeing that factors like petrol, the increase in pump price of petrol obviously was going to affect the inflation. We're seeing that there's rising food costs. So all of these factors put together will then ensure that what you're saying, you know, what the naira was worth months before is not exactly what is worth now. And then the question would be, if these businesses, if SMEs being the backbone of the economy, have to still keep thriving, what measures, what approaches, and you know, are they going to need to adapt to be able to help them wave this, you know, to be able to help them not sink in this economy that we're currently experiencing. So I'm really glad that you've highlighted others. There have also been some behind-the-scene conversations that we've had away from the panel sessions that the Nigerian Economic Summit has presented. We as News Central team have been able to interview a number of these people. I've done interviews, Osarogie has done some interviews, and you have done some interviews as well. But I'd like you to share, you know, which of the interviews or some of the things that stood out for you from the interviews that you did yesterday.
Okay, interesting. I interviewed Oyeyemika, that's the MD of Cadbury Mondelez, and then she was saying a lot of things about how that, well, they are also excited about the withholding tax, the new withholding tax regime, but they need clarity on certain things. They know that when it comes into full force, it's going to be good for them. That's one. And she highlighted how challenging it has been to be in business. I mean, she talked about how that just before this whole reform came to be, they started a particular product which was doing very well, and based on how well that product was doing, they invested massively, you know, imported equipment and all of those, because they wanted to go right in, only for the reforms to start, and they found out that, you know, I mean, consumers didn't have enough money anymore to, you know, and then she said that snacking isn't something that, I mean, snacking became maybe something for, maybe, you know, before you would want to snack and all of that, but now it's luxury now. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Snacking is more like luxury now, so you want to eat first. You don't even, I mean, for someone who hasn't eaten once or two times in a day, that person isn't thinking of snacking. So she said because of that, they had to pause. Now, listen, they have an investment, they have bought equipment, they have made some moves, but now they had to pause everything because they have seen that it's not working. And then she's also said something quite instructive. She said that the pricing, the sort of pricing, the change in pricing they have done in the past close to 2 years is much more than the pricing change they have done in 15 years. Now, if you've been in business for 15 years and all the pricing and all the change in price you've done so far is nothing compared to what you have done in 2 years, that's a lot. And she says this pricing is just a survival mechanism for them. It doesn't mean that they are making more money. And she said that, so because at the end of the day, volumes are, the volumes are collapsing. They don't have volumes anymore. Maybe a line that you probably sell maybe 1 million or 2 million products in a month, you're beginning to sell maybe 500,000 or 1 million
and if
products.
you bring it down from the larger scale, if you bring it down to small scale businesses, everyday consumables, there's a sachetization going on. Things that we used to buy in jars, bottles, people are now putting them in smaller sachets and selling so that people can actually afford them. Things got really bad that we heard that people could no longer buy tubers of yams. They had to start selling them in slices. So from sachet of water to sachet of certain other products, and you were talking about how people are really being driven into hunger. It is a challenge. It's someone that's eating that will talk of snacking. Reports have it that over 25 million people are experiencing food insecurity in Nigeria. So it's not really the best times for businesses, for individuals, it's just, which is why these conversations are important, so that we can find the best way to make the most of these challenges that we're experiencing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not good for anybody, I think these are some of the things that we've established in the last 3 days. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the small business owner. It's not good for the multinationals. It's not good for, the, Nigerian family. We've seen Nigeria, that used to have the largest market share for some multinationals now drop, to maybe third or fourth position in the last few years. Mm-hmm. Yes, and of course a lot of them are closing shop, and leaving. And that's the actual reality.
You know what's scary about them leaving? Because I remember during one of the panel sessions, I think Oyeyemika, one of the person mentioned it, that they are leaving because they don't see a future. They're asking themselves, how long is this going to continue? And they don't see a future, they don't see an end in sight, and that is why they are leaving. And that is quite scary, if you ask me, because if multinationals, they have the best minds and all of those to, check their books and do all the data and calculations, if they are saying that they don't see an end in sight, if they are saying that they don't see a future, then what are we seeing?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, again, one of the things that was also pretty obvious was the questions that I saw a few people ask, away from the panels, which were, what's the use really of the Nigerian Economic Summit and these discussions? So of course the board of the summit and of course those who have put it together would always argue that they have made improvements, they've made changes, policy changes, which is true. Since 1993, there have been certain policy changes, but for me, I feel like this is also an avenue for a lot of people to express what their personal experiences are as multinationals and as small business owners, and of course as the average consumer in Nigeria, and of course x-ray the policies of the current Nigerian government, see what the realities would be in the next couple of years, and see if it is worth staying. Many people would of course second guess or think twice about investing in Nigeria today because of what the economic realities are for these people. So what we have from the government side, when we heard from Wale Edun yesterday, and of course the Vice President on Monday, what we have is a situation where it looks good on paper, where they keep promoting the fact that yes, we're making more money, we've earned more, but it looks good on paper, doesn't look good on ground. Yeah. The reality is is really, really bloody for a lot of people. So we've spoken in the past about customs, and how customs will continue to declare profits, and how much they've earned this year, so much. But it's not because they've changed their policies or improved on anything in general. It's really just devaluation of the naira and also increment in custom rates here and there that have taken a toll on the business owner and the multinationals who are bringing in goods into Nigeria. And I remember a couple of days ago I also saw someone say that it doesn't matter to him if customs let them increase their prices and their rates 100%. What he's going to do is put that on the consumer, and so he doesn't suffer as a businessman. So it's not looking good.
It's not looking good, because if that's what you have just described happened, which is what actually happens, the consumer then suffers it, and then the consumer is working, in some cases they're working in organizations where they're still earning the same salary because the employers of labor are spending more to run the business, so they can't get an increment in salary, and their salary has automatically lost the weight that it typically should have had. It's not the best of times, but we will keep talking about how individuals and businesses can thrive in these times and make the best of the situation that we find ourselves, which is why these conversations are happening here at the Nigerian Economic Summit. We're going to break. When we come back, there are more conversations happening this morning on Breakfast Central.